Hey, welcome to the Sharp Way Show. So happy to see you. I know I've been gone for about a week. I was off for a bit, but I am now back. It is 7 p.m. now, a little bit after on the East Coast, and I'm here talking about something that I know is near and dear to many of you, and that is the idea of how in the world are we able to actually help people who have been traditionally marginalized. We hear it all the time about how we're going to do this and create this program and that program and the other program. And we've been trying to do it for, I don't know, forever. And it hasn't been working very well. But I have a guest today who's been talking about many ways of making that happen. Similar things that I've been saying, but from a different point of view. Feel free to ask her questions, and I will be asking her many questions. I have with me this evening the economic director at the Independent Women's Forum, Patrice Onwuka. How are you?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm doing awesome. I'm glad you are able to give me a few moments of your time. And for those of you who want to follow her, please follow her on Twitter if you would, at Patrice Pink File on Twitter. Also, her information is in the description. If you want to check her out, you can check out what she's doing there. Patrice, I have to ask this question because I think it's the biggest one out there, which is your family is an immigrant family.
Yes.
And you have basically somehow live the American dream, or close to it, right? What people think is the American dream. But a lot of youngsters don't believe that anymore. They think the American dream is dead. There's no way of making it happen, blah, blah, blah. How do we get, I mean, there's some data that shows there's something true about that, but it's not true. It's harder, maybe. How do we get them to see either how to fix it or what we can do about it?
Sure. So, there's a lot of pessimism. And frankly, I think we've got a generation that's been raised to believe that life will be worse for them in the future. That opportunity they're locked out of opportunity simply because they're born in this generation. And particularly if they have this skin color or a less than white shade of skin color.
Absolutely.
And it's wrong. It's frankly, it's a disgusting, demoralizing narrative that is, infiltrated K through 12 education. It's in music, it's in entertainment. And so we have to fight back against that. And frankly, we're also dealing with generational poverty in some families where there's a cycle of pathologies that destroy where the family is destroyed, where ideas around getting up, going to work, living, doing a regular job is okay. Waiting until you have a high school diploma at least and getting a job before you settle down and have a family. Some basic values.
Let me touch that piece if I could. Right, you
I
brought
know
up a
it's
very
kind of a
important
hot
piece
already, right?
No, it's great. But the point I bring up, I brought this up before in the past when I was running for office. I would say, please stop blaming the individual so much. They're responsible, but then help them to step up versus just blaming them. The straight blame isn't helpful. And I said to people who come to my events, I would say, imagine if you would for a second. Imagine if you had never seen your mother or father go off to work. You'd never seen it. Not just that, you never saw your grandfather or grandmother ever go off to work.
Yeah.
That was something you had never seen. That's the generational piece you were talking about, right? Yes. So imagine if you were a kid growing up and you had never seen neither your grandparents nor your parents get up in the morning, take a shower, go to work, or maybe go to work, take a shower when you get home, depending on what kind of work you do, right? But still get up, go to work, and do that, and then get a paycheck at the end of the week or the end of the month, right? You've never seen that. You would be a different person.
You would.
Right? You'd be a different person.
You would. And I think that's why we see a lot of young people, breaking windows, running into stores, stealing Louis and Gucci.
I wish they were buying.
There's a missing I'd like to believe they are. Some of them are buying it, but there's a missing piece there. There's the educational piece. There's the family piece that's been disrupted. And now you juxtapose that with myself. I'm an immigrant. I came to this country when I was 3 years old, over 30 years ago. My parents are, I think they're the embodiment of the American dream. They had a high school education when they came to this country. They worked menial jobs. Together they earned less than I earned in my first full job in DC. They managed, though, to raise 2, then 3 kids, save to buy a house outside of the ghetto, because we moved to the ghetto from the Caribbean, middle class lifestyle in the Caribbean, to poverty, gun violence, poor neighborhood in Boston, and started from scratch with absolutely nothing. And they saved, and they bought a house, and they told us about education. They put us through some fantastic schools, and my brothers and I are who we are today because of that. Now, I have the benefit of having seen 2 parents going to work every day.
Yep.
Tithing at church on Sundays, going to church, being part of their community, prioritizing education, feeding us a hot meal on the table every night. Those are things that I think I've been blessed with. But at the same time, I don't think we can, we can't, a young person can't just say, well, I didn't have that, so I'm going to throw my hands in the air. No, I do think this is where civil society is a critical piece. Civil society is simply just those nonprofit organizations. In the Black community, the Black church used to serve this role.
It's community.
It's community. There are interesting studies that suggest that even if a young Black boy grows up in a neighborhood where he sees other men going to work, having a family and taking care of their family, he may not have that in his own house, but if he sees that in the neighborhood, he is more likely to replicate that kind of behavior and frankly, lift himself out of poverty and have better outcomes than if he didn't have any sort of role models around him whatsoever. So that's
it's funny to say that, right? I look at my own life. I lost my father when I was 12 when my father passed. So I didn't have a father in my life as a teenage boy. I was lost. I was a lost teenager. No question I was. But what I saw was, but it's going to sound silly, my father was in the military, and I saw military recruiters in my high school. So I thought I was going to be going to the Marine Corps. And I tell a story often. My audience will love the stories. I say it all the time, but I'll tell you it. I actually was going to join the Army because my father was in the Army.
Okay.
Then I decided when I went to the recruiting station, there were all 4 recruiters in the same building when I went there. I was 17 years old. I had no idea what I was going to do. I just thought, I'll just do this. This is the answer. To your point, I was following the male role models around me, right? So I went there, and the Army guy was like, oh, it's going to be great. We're going to make you a general in a month. You're going to be, traveling around the world, making tons of money, meeting all beautiful women. It's going to be amazing. You're going to get a PhD in 6 days. It's going to be great. Promised me everything. And I was like, oh my God, this is great. So I had all the Army, like the Go Army book covers and the bumper stickers, and I'm walking outside, and the Marine Corps recruiter is there. And he's just standing there with his arms folded. And he says, hey, son, you got a minute? And I'm thinking, yeah, you can't stop me. I'm super smart. You can't get me, Marine Corps guy. So I go on in, and he says, an Army guy, he offered you a lot. I said, yeah, he offered me everything. I'm going to be a general. It's going to be amazing. People going to love me. I'm going to be PhD. It's going to be great. He goes, you know what we call that in the Marine Corps? I said, what? He said, the solar plan. Everything under the sun. You know what I'm going to promise you? I said, what? He said, 4 hard years. Son, are you ready? And I went, yes. And I signed up.
Wow.
Because now then I didn't know why. But to your point, I look back now with hindsight and say, I was looking for positive male role models.
Yes.
I was looking for men to say, hey, young man, are you ready to be a man? I will show you. Are you ready to be a man or not? And I was like, yes, I'm ready. Somebody show me. And I went there, and that's what I did it. And that's, I guess, your point. These men weren't my father, but they were positive male role models that I was yearning to follow. And sadly, to your point, if the only male role models I see are gangbangers, I will join a gang.
Yeah.
Because those are the positive male role models that I see. So I'm going to go do that. That guy's got money. That guy's tough, right? He's a tough guy. He's got money. He's got women. Well, I'm 16, 15. I want to be a tough guy to have money and women. I'm going to copy this guy because I don't see anybody else.
And that's why we need, when I talk about community, some people think, well, I got to be a big brother like Denzel Washington. You don't necessarily have to sign up for an organization. If you do, that's great. But I think we just need to see more of a presence of men. Men doing regular jobs, men, whether it's cleaning the streets for the city to make sure it's beautiful, whether it's running your own small business, whatever the case is, that's, I think, the kind of spillover effect that can be helpful for Black young men in particular. But there are lots of issues, but I like to focus on how do we provide opportunity for people.
Yes.
I've
And the
gotten
thing
a
you bring
lot of
up all
heat
the
lately.
time, I'm sorry, say again?
I've gotten a lot of heat lately talking about just the idea of giving people cash. I don't support that because I think a life of dependency is not an independent life. It's frankly, it's more it's more of you being tethered to somebody else's wills and control over your life than you being able to own your own future. And there are so many avenues that I could go in, and I'm sure we're going to talk about lots of them. But I would just say, just to start off, we've done a huge disservice to a lot of young disadvantaged kids, Black, brown, white, whatever the case is. When in the 90s, we started saying that the best way to a middle-class life was through a 4-year college campus. We had
Yes.
huge disservice to kids for whom college is not the right next step after
Absolutely.
high school. And we diminish the trades. And frankly, you don't just have to work in a trade to have a middle skill type job. There are so many of them across many
100%.
industries. And that is
and not even, to be clear, not even just that, but also the idea of the most advanced careers, meaning the cutting edge careers, which are all tech. None of them require degrees. None of them.
Yeah.
And what most people don't know, and I've said it here before, you go back 10 years. When I do my day job, I'm a business consultant.
Mhm.
So when I'm consulting with business, I knew 10 years ago in the high-end tech field, having a master's degree is a no hire. Literally a no hire. They look at you, oh, master's degree? No. Master's degree? No. It's a no hire. What they want to do is, have you done something? They get most of their people now literally from hackathons.
That makes sense.
Yes, from hackathons. So literally, if you go to college for computers, the classes are literally irrelevant. Just go to the college-sponsored hackathons. Get Fs. It does not, don't show up. It is, and I'm not trying to be mean. I'm saying if you want to actually work in the field and have a job, showing up to class for a computer science degree is useless. Don't waste your time unless you want to get a partner for next weekend's hackathon. So just go to the hackathon, show you can do something, and they will literally hire you out of the school. Now, MIT and such, those are savvy schools because those schools, they're actually incubators. So literally a lot of the newer schools who get it, most don't have to get it. To your point, government's paying the bill, so they don't have to get it. But those that have to get it, they're all incubators. So they will help you grow your business because they're getting a cut. They don't care if you go to school or not. They don't care if you ever show up to class. Get your business going on. They're getting a cut. Have a nice day. That's all they care about. So even high-tech jobs, now licensed jobs require degrees. You want to be a lawyer, a doctor, an engineer. I get that completely. But then that's a mindset or a path that makes you want to go to college. But to your point, we're not doing that. We're saying college has magic powers. Just spend $100,000 and there will magically be a cool job waiting for you when you're done. And boy, was that a lie.
It was like a bunch of magic beans, and you throw them in the ground and they did not sprout. There was no Jack. Jack is still looking for the beanstalk to climb up. And so imagine if you're a kid who doesn't have any opportunity, you've grown up without seeing, good examples of how you can climb out of where you're coming from. And then someone tells you, oh, you need to go to a 4-year college. And you already know that either you can't afford it or you're just not that kind of student. And so it's demoralizing and not surprising.
Not ready for it.
They're not, and you're not ready for it. You probably have to do remedial classes. So I think this is where, and I've seen some fantastic programs that say, you know what, we're going to teach you, we're going to come into your community, teach you the skills to get this type of job in this company, we'll give you an internship, you get the hands-on experience. If you need to take advanced courses, we can help pay for that. Then you get a job, but you're also getting some of the soft skills that a lot of kids, I saw my parents, I gleaned from my parents, like working hard, showing up on time, punctuality, all of which are not white supremacy, by the way, but are just common practices that help organizations run.
I think I like this story. I when I was going around, I would tell people these stories about how difficult it is, to hire people, right? And then most people just hire someone with a work ethic. They want work ethic no matter what.
Work ethic.
Rest. And one guy told me this. He said, Larry, you don't understand. Let me tell you what my hiring practices are. I said, what? He goes, I tell them the interview's at 8. I open the door at 7:45. If they're there, they're hired. Done. That's his hiring process. I open the door at 7:45. He's there, hired, done. That's it. There's nothing else. You can show up. And when I told that story in another event, somebody said, "Oh my God, Larry, it's so true." He said, this is a guy who happened to be recruiting. He said, "I had 12 appointments last week. 6 were no-shows, 4 were late. So out of 12 appointments for a job, for interviews, 2 showed up on time." So your point, I guess I'm just reinforcing your point, because you're exactly right. The soft skills matter.
The soft skills matter, but kids have to learn those. And so there's, whether it's community coming around and helping a child. And I love to look at historically how Black churches used to be the center of a lot of this. And unfortunately, I think they've gotten into lots of other different mission areas, mission creep.
Well, no, they've also been regulated out of childcare.
Very true.
Right.
And will be priced out because of government subsidies in the future.
Yes.
An entitlement program. But the church is not, it could be a stronger force there. Just generally, organizations that are dedicated to doing this can help that young person see, oh, I can actually be like this guy who has a nice life. He goes on a nice vacation once, twice a year, nice wife, some kids, he's not stressed like maybe I've seen around him. And I don't see that kind of dysfunction. And I think if we start to, on the one-on-one scale, start to show these examples, not even just tell about them, but show them, that I think can have some long-term generational impacts. Now, I know there are other people who are going to say, oh, let's just start another program and dump some money into this community. Well, very often that money gets filtered through organizations that are actually not doing anything other than padding the administrators' pockets. But their only interest is kind of making sure that they stay in business, which is to get more grants and all of that. And they're actually not doing the work of helping. But then government also has a role in ensuring that if there are laws or regulatory requirements that just don't make sense and become a barrier to a young person, an immigrant, a woman, a military spouse, whatever the case is, trying to get to their American dream, then we got to knock those down. And I think that's a role I love to talk about that in lots of different ways.
So let's go down to the one that I've brought up in the past, which is, and you bring up constantly, which I love. You're one of the only other people who brings this up, occupational licensing. Now, the one I bring up specifically for New York, in New York City, you probably know this. There are a lot of women, usually immigrants, usually from the West Indies, who like to braid hair as a business. It's a common practice here in New York, specifically Brooklyn, but also Manhattan. Manhattan and Brooklyn, you see a lot of that. That's against the law in New York State. You have to have a license for that. And the license will cost you somewhere around $20,000 to $30,000. Now, what I always say is, what does some administrator in Albany, our capital, know about a Black woman's hair? The answer, nothing. Yet they get to still decide how that works. It is impossible. Now, when I was a kid growing up, I grew up in the South Bronx, not a very great neighborhood. But when I grew up, I remember still to this day, there were young girls, almost always Black, who would be outside braiding hair on the stoop for money. It was a thing they did. They made cash. And I remember out in the street, there were often people fixing cars. Back then, they made cars out of metal. Now they don't, but they used to. So they would be banging out dents and repainting cars. And they were almost always Hispanic, Dominican or Puerto Rican. I don't know why, but that was what usually people were. And there were people who would be selling things on the street. They were very often either Asian or Indian. It was very common for us to have that in my neighborhood back in those days. And somehow all of that now is legal. So they've literally said, if you are poor, trying to hustle to make $1 to grow yourself and your family and learn that work ethic, because you know what? You got to be out in the street when the guy needs his car fixed. You got to be in the stoop when the girl needs her hair braided. So you begin to learn that stuff, and then pricing and the whole deal. The state, in my state, I don't know how your state is, but in my state has come in and devastated poor communities.
Oh, yeah, that's a great example. Nails, nail technicians, eyelashes, eyebrow threaders. I can go on. You probably name every part of the body where there's someone who has a skill. It's not learned necessarily in a book. It's a skill. And sometimes in the case of hair braiders, it's cultural. It's passed down from generation to generation. And what happens, these occupational licenses simply are just the government saying, hey, you can practice this skill. You've demonstrated some proficiency in it. Is there a legitimate cause for licensure? Yeah, I want my doctor to be licensed. But you know what? I actually don't care if my nail tech is licensed, frankly. If they know what they're doing, that's fine. And I think
I have a good rule of thumb.
Okay.
Right? Rule of thumb. Would you ask your friend to do it? Would you ask your friend to do your nails? You might. So why do you want a license? Would you ask for them to walk your dog? By the way, there's a dog walking license in New York.
In New York, yes, I've written about it.
That's correct. Yes. So would you ask for them to walk your dog? Sure. Why? Would you ask your friend to remove your gallbladder? No. Get a license. So that's my point, right?
That's not a bad rule of thumb. I mean, you see states like Mississippi tell a woman who has a nutrition business. She's not a licensed dietitian, but she gives nutrition tips and has a community of people helping them, eat healthy. She was given a cease and desist letter saying, you can't do that because you're not licensed. What we're getting, the bottom line here is actually the bottom line. You have established businesses who say, you know what, we don't want new competition from people who undercut us because they're cheaper and they're new market folks.
And probably better.
So we're going to tickle the ear of a lawmaker and institute this license. We are going to sit on the board and determine who gets their license approved. And then we're going to make it so hard for people that if you don't have the money, you don't have the time. I mean, think about a single mom who's got 2 kids. She may not have the money or the time to spend time in a cosmetology class learning how to dye hair when all she's doing is braiding and she never touches chemicals whatsoever. It's all natural. So the license doesn't make sense. The requirements don't make sense. And frankly, it's a racket. And that's a great example of, there's so many occupations, and even worse with this, criminal license, having a criminal background can keep you from getting a license.
Yes.
So you're a barber. You've served your time. You do not want to go back out on the streets. You have a skill. Now you got to figure out, how do I get a license in my state? And some states are far worse than others, but some states literally say that as a criminal a former convict, you cannot get a license. We will never let you have a license in particular areas, even if it had nothing to do with your criminal background.
Utterly unconstitutional, and you can't get a judge to say no. Completely unconstitutional. And you can't get a judge to say no at all. That's absolutely wrong. But yeah, it's all over the place, right? I think you're completely great. Dave, by the way, says you need a license to be a psychic in the state of Florida. Wow.
That's a funny one.
How do you get your license? Do you gotta tell the future or something? You gotta pick the lotto numbers for the next day or something? You get it right, you get your license? Is that how it works? I don't know how to get that.
That'll be interesting.
That's good. I want to know who made that up. And is there a board of psychics that decide if you're a real psychic or not? That'd be amazing.
Yeah, they deserve a reality TV show. That I would watch.
Yes. Oh, that's so good. Psychic License, the movie. I love that. So good. Yes. But the other piece I want to bring up here is it's a way of rewarding people who donate, right? So if I'm becoming governor of New York and I want to get a bunch of money from people, if the people give me money are wealthy people who own 7 or 8 barbershops, they give me money and I put them on the board. Right. So the boards are also used to reward donors, right? To reward the heavy hitters. So there are secondary pieces. And sadly, running for office, I saw all of this. Wow. So you see how they reward donors in many ways. You wonder, why do people give so much money? Well, if I give, $10,000 to this person running, for some office, he or she puts me on a board that keeps my business in order, right? I get to now write the rules for my own industry. That's worth $20,000, right? If I'm a big enough business owner, that's totally worth it. So I'm happy to give Patrice, when she runs for governor, $20,000. She's going to put me on a board that's going to make sure my business stays in business for 20 years. Easy day. I'm happy to give her that money. Best investment I can possibly do.
Larry, you were enlightening me here because I never knew that angle of it. I didn't realize that the donor, the established businesses are kind of tickling the pockets. I thought they were just tickling their ears, but they're tickling their pockets too with cash. Okay.
Absolutely. Yes. They pay money so they can control their industry. Right. It happens here in New York. Yep. It used to be the biggest donors. If I remember right, in New York State used to be finance. That's going away. Now it's real estate. So, but real estate's hurting now too in New York State. So I don't know which ones they fight with each other. New York City is heavily real estate, finances throughout the entire state. But now the cannabis board, right? In New York State, we've recently legalized cannabis, but now there is an Office of Cannabis Management, which is an embarrassment. Cannabis has been in the black market for about 100 years in this country. Nobody's dying of cannabis. Now that we're making it legal, we have to have an Office of Cannabis Management. People say, well, why would you do that? Well, because the people who are making money off cannabis are actually wealthy real estate investors who are buying up the farmland. So they want to make sure that they can control how this works, so all the farmers can be thrown out, and so the small guys can't undercut them. So they create the Office of Cannabis Management so they can all get on the board and shut everybody down. And they're doing that now. So they create this is how government and business gets together. So it isn't just to crush the little guy. It is, but it's also to make sure the big guy keeps his status or her status and can also move forward, particularly when it comes to big real estate and big finance.
It's disgusting.
It is.
And unfortunately, the people who suffer are the people who do not have the platform, who do not have the deep pockets, who frankly don't have people to advocate on their behalf, other than organizations that are doing the hard work of calling attention to this. I mean, I do a little bit of it. Institute for Justice is another great organization that fights, literally sues states to see some of these occupational licensing requirements reduced because it locks people out of opportunity. And so, 100%. Cry me a river when you're saying, oh, we're not helping the poor enough. Well, we believe in that idea that, you help the poor by not just giving them a fish, but teaching them how to fish.
Yes.
If you truly believe that, then you're not going to take the rod out of the fisherman's hands, and you're not going to lock them behind a gate and say, oh, you could just look at the water. You're never going to get it. We're just going to give you the little.
I would go one step further. You're saying teach them how to fish. Just let them fish.
Thank you.
You don't even have to teach them. Most of them already know how to fish.
They will figure it out.
Let them fish.
They'll figure it out.
We stopped them. And you brought up something that I love, and I want my audience to hear this. You brought up the point that I never really touched on, which I really wish I touched more on this, which is the idea that most people who are doing those side jobs or doing those gig jobs or doing that side hustle, that most of them are people who are just trying to get money for necessities.
Yeah.
They're not someone who's just trying to stick it to the man or buy their third yacht or whatever. That's not happening, right? I mean, they are like, okay, I'm a mom who's at home, and maybe I got to make some extra cash so I can give my kids, some special school clothes this year or something. So let me go out and hustle a little bit, make some cash, and then I can have some cash in my family. But we're not only attacking the entrepreneurs you talked about with licensing, we're also hitting the gig worker hard.
Yeah. So
and that part drives me crazy.
Oh yeah. I mean, independent contracting, literally like freelancers. And this is an industry that's been around well before Uber and Lyft drove into town. We're talking about people who simply are their own entrepreneurs, and they have a skill, they have expertise, and they're willing to just take on their own clients. They make their own schedule. They decide when, how, where to work. And there are over 73 million people who fall into that category. Now, it does include people who are delivering Postmates right now, who are driving Uber on the side, but it's also people who, are doing it full time as well. So you've got this whole nation of small businesses in short. Well, guess what? They can't be unionized. And right now there's this massive union push, this idea that every private sector worker needs to be unionized, even if you don't want to be. And these 73 million people cannot be unionized by federal law. So now there's this idea, well, why don't we just reclassify them as employees of the companies rather than an Uber driver is an employee of Uber, not just an independent contractor. Well, that has massive ramifications.
Yes, it does.
The greatest of which is you lose your livelihoods. You lose your contracts. You lose your ability to have a flexible schedule and to work around your own unique circumstances.
Yes. Let me touch a couple of things on that one. One is I grew up in the 70s, so you know how old I am. I grew up in the 70s in the South Bronx, and there wasn't an Uber. But you know what we had? We actually had gypsy cabs. Gypsy cabs were a thing when I was a kid. And again, for so many of them from the West Indies, most of them were Jamaican at the time. That was, in fact, if you ever watch an old 70s TV show like Kojak or Starsky and Hutch or any of those old TV shows from the 70s set in the 70s in New York City, You'll always find a gypsy cab driver, and he'll always have a Jamaican accent because that was so common back in the days, right? These are people who are, to your point, in my neighborhood, cabs wouldn't come to my neighborhood, right? They wouldn't come. So there were no cabs in my neighborhood. So what happened? To your point, people said, wait a minute, no cabs. I got a car. I'll drive. And in my neighborhood, what they would do is he'd paint one of his doors a different color. That's how you knew it was gypsy cab, right? So like his car would be blue, but then one door is red. Oh, okay, gypsy cab. You would know, right? And if you didn't live there, you didn't need to know. But you lived there, we knew. Oh, okay, gypsy cab. So we'd know how to get around. And so that was being done. This is 50 years ago. It was being done, right? It's to your point. People have always been doing that, trying to hustle. But it's the second piece. You don't have to unionize if you already have ownership. And now if the left is very much, and this, I agree with them on this. I agree with the left on this 100%. The left talks, the far left, I should say, not the Democrat left. The far left says, Larry, socialism is about workers owning the means of production. I'm like, I'm in. Let them do it. That's called entrepreneurship. Let's do that. Right? So if I own my job, if I own my company, I by default own the means of production. I'm in. The left should be in on this one, right? You don't have to unionize if I already own the company and or own my labor. I only need to unionize if someone else owns my labor. So why don't we let more people own their own labor? You won't have to have so many unions.
Well, that would be nice, but you know, and listen, I understand where you're coming from. I wouldn't go as far as to say that it's the socialist ideal is just, well, you own your own. We could talk. I'm
trying to be good, Patrice. I'm trying to be good.
Hey, you don't have to be good on my part, but I will just say, yeah, ideally, yeah, if you can make your own decisions, then you should be able to make your own decisions. But absolutely. Union power is a power center for, you know, frankly, one particular party and one particular side of the political spectrum.
The exception of police unions. Police unions now have gone. Unions,
that's true.
They have now gone to
They've flipped out. That's right.
They did flip. Yep.
But I mean, you're talking about how can you get access to these individuals? And so this is a way, turning them into employees. Yep. Well, a company can't afford to hire them, paying unemployment benefits, paying compensation, different forms of compensation, abiding by federal and state laws when it comes to what an employee needs to be paid and covered, healthcare, all of that stuff. And so you're gonna see the jobs disappear. And we saw what this happened in California. California did this exact thing. They reclassified pretty much all of their independent contractors, and overnight, even like Vox Media cut their independent contracting status labor force, even after writing, oh, this law is going to be wonderful for workers because it's extremely expensive. But cost aside, this is about freedom. This is about choice. I should be able to choose where and how I want to work. And if I want to be an employee, which I am for Independent Women's Forum, that's great. If I want to be an independent contractor, which I also am, I have other contract work, I get to do that. And as a woman who has had 2 children, I have 3, but 2 children, I needed flexibility to be able to manage my caregiving, the kids, with my husband, and all of that. And independent contracting allows people to do that.
But it also allows something else, though. And this is for people, again, who are marginalized. If you are, say, as for example, you're a mom who decided to take a couple years off and raise your children. Well, now you're out of the workforce for 2 years. That's a long time in certain fields. So you might need to be a contractor, either though you're off part-time here or there to stay involved, or once you come back, you come back in, you spend 6 months as a contractor to relearn everything, get back to speed before you get back into your world. What if you were an addict and you were out of it for several years until you finally got your life together? You can't go back to work right away.
Yep.
What if you were in jail? You do 3 years, 4 years, then what? Right? I look at it from myself. My mom, many people who watch know my mom was an addict and she was also a felon. So when she got out, how'd she go back to work? Local people gave her jobs in like diners and such, right? So that's how she got herself back together. Often people need that 2 or 3 years or 1 or 2 months or something to get themselves back into the mode of working again, right? When you haven't been working for a while. So this isn't just someone's freedom. It is that, you're correct. It's also the way that people get a second chance. What happens when your job goes away? That happens in America. Your company packs up and leaves, or your industry is no longer valid anymore, or they get automation, your job's gone. You got to learn a new job. Well, who's going to hire you? Nobody is. You don't have experience yet. So be a freelancer, be a part-timer, be a gig worker to learn. But not just that, maybe you don't know what you want to do yet. You got fired. Now what do I do? Okay, take 2 or 3 gig jobs and go, that's the new thing for me. And then go there. I'm sorry, but I'm all about second chances. And I want to bring that piece up also. That's all.
It's important. And I'll add, what if you can't go back to work, period? So I talked to a woman. She was raped and her rapist tried to murder her. The trauma that she experienced after that. She told me, Patrice, I couldn't sit behind a desk. I couldn't be around people and function because I was dealing with my own mental health issues after being a murder survivor. I mean, that alone is insane. She said the way I was able to still support my family was because I was an independent contractor. If independent contracting is legislated out or regulated out of existence, what happens to people like me? On the flip side, or on the other side of the coin, we interviewed a quadriplegic, a man who has no functioning from his neck down. He relies on people who are independent contractors to come and help him, home health aides to come and help him. Well, what happens when they can't do because of independent contracting restrictions, they can't be there to serve him? So you have people who are losing opportunities, people who need it, whether they have health conditions or family constraints or whatever the situation is. And then the people who they're serving clients to, they also are losing out. We saw what happened in California. The fact that now the Democrats in Congress want to make this a federal policy. The Department of Labor has proposed a rule that would make this federal policy. And now we have Julie Su, who's been nominated to head the Department of Labor, who architected what happened in California, who would be overseeing this nationally. It's devastating, and it's something that we are calling attention to because women will be impacted, minorities will be impacted, poor people will be impacted, survivors will be impacted. It'll have rippling impacts across the country.
And people just aren't seeing it. Let me do a little bit of a housekeeping if I could. Guys, if you're watching or listening to this and you have not clicked that like button yet, what is wrong with you? This is amazing conversation. Click that like button, do it now. If you haven't done it yet, do it now. Please, it does matter tremendously. It's how I get past those algorithms. I have to get past them because I don't like what we talk about here on YouTube and other places like that. So help me out with a like if you would. If you happen to be watching this on YouTube, you can super chat me if you want to get your comments at the front. That's awesome. You can do that. That'd be great. If you are watching this on Twitter, do me a favor, retweet this right now. Right now, click retweet so other people can see it and they can talk about what we're talking about and have the cool conversations. Speaking of conversations, I need you to support my sponsor too. The sponsor for the show is the advocates.org, the Advocates for Self-Government. There are many surveys on the advocates.org. Please go take one of my, I just put one up in the description. It's the one on identity politics. Perfect timing. Take that survey if you like. Take the survey and then share it. It takes about 4 to 5 minutes to take the survey. I know it's some time, but it's free. It costs you nothing. So just do it, share it so that we can have more conversations about that. It does matter. They are my sponsors. If you do that, they like it. I like it. Everybody's happy and it's free. It's awesome. But do me one more favor if you would. Patrice has been so good. She's given us so much time and she's not even done. I'm still going to bug her for like another half hour. So I'm still bugging her. She's not even done yet. So follow her on Twitter. See what she's doing. She's doing all kind of stuff. She's on other shows. She's got her own show. Please check her out. It's Patrice Pink File on Twitter. Please check it out. And if you're listening, Patrice is Patrice, Pink File. Check her out on Twitter so that we can make sure that she's so happy that she came here. I hope she is. Yeah. So yes, I want to keep going down this road because I'm up federal. Recently with the American Rescue Plan, which was supposed to help us out so much, that help out also decided that they're going to come after us with 80,000 new IRS agents and new rules on if $600 or more on Venmo or something. And all of a sudden now you got to report this stuff. And this is going to go after the billionaires. You know, billionaires are notorious for $600 transactions on Venmo. We know they do that all the time. That's what billionaires always do. Clearly, I'm being facetious, but this is just another, I want to be polite. I'm not going to. It's a lie. It's another lie to punish people. And what this does is it is a gift to the unions. What I mean by that is as you pull people off of being able to help themselves, they will search for government jobs and government contracts. It is normal. It's what happens. In New York State, we're up to something like 1 in 6 people somehow works for the government.
Wow.
Maybe up to 1 in 5, even if you count all the contracts. So the government becomes, if you look at states like California, Illinois, and New York, the only growth we have is through government spending. Literally, there's no other economic growth. None. It's only through government spending. But that is the goal, because government spending means government public sector unions. Those unions have so much money, they give that money right back to candidates. So again, this is about the cash. It's all about candidates getting money. This is what all of this is about, candidates getting money. You would think about it's about politics. Most of the people who are running for office have no ideology. They just follow the ideology of the party they're in, and they're in that party because that's the party that gets elected. In fact, if New York became Republican tomorrow, half people would just turn Republican. Because that's what would get them elected. They don't really have an ideology. They have I want power and money, and I want to be in charge. And what party is that? I'm that party. That's what most of them are. So this is a gift to the unions because more people become unionized. New York State is the most unionized state in the entire country, followed by, I think, California, then Illinois, not mistaken. And that's where all these things come from, because they're all gifts to unions. Non-heavily unionized states would not even think about this. Why? There's no gift to unions. So this is all about a gift to unions. So when this happens, more people will do it. And I'm not mad at the people. If I'm someone in some area and I can't get ahead because the government's always beating me up, but the local school system's hiring, I'm going to get a job at the school system, right? The local prison's hiring. I'm going to go be a measure in a prison. I'm going to go be a prison guard, right? Because that's the job that I can get because no one else will hire me and there's no other jobs around here. So as we start doing what you're talking about, you're going to see more and more people start saying, I can't do this anymore. I give up. I'm either going to pack up and leave, which you're seeing happening in Illinois, California, and New York, all those 3 states. People are packing up and leaving because they just can't do it, or they're getting government jobs.
And and obviously then that locks them into being, it makes them feel more hard. It makes them feel like they cannot criticize the government, or can't say that the government needs to be reduced, or can't say that government spending needs to be brought under control, because in some way or shape or form, they're benefiting from that.
Absolutely.
And no one should feel that way.
Absolutely. And that's why you always want more private sector growth, but you're not finding that in those 3 states. You're finding government growth. That's a big deal. So
and government crowds out. Government crowds out. Whether you're talking about in the private sector, particularly charitable giving, government crowds out the churches, the small nonprofits, the organizations that should be they're closest to the problem. They understand the people who are being more affected most, and are probably best at coming up with agile, quick, impactful solutions. They get crowded out in place of a government bureaucrat giving out, being gatekeeper to government funding. And unfortunately, the problems never seem to get solved. They seem to just continue generation after generation.
Well, because what government does well is not fix, it is serve. Government doesn't help, government serves. So now people, the example I give often, right? Nonprofit versus a government agency. Government agency. I go to my boss, hey, I serviced 200 people this week. He goes, great, Larry, you're awesome. Great. Next week, I served 210. Larry, you're the best. You're awesome. Great. Next week, I served 250. Awesome. It's 250 people. That's awesome. We can maybe get a raise. Maybe get another person in here. Blah, blah, blah. This is great. Awesome. And then someone comes by and say, well, this week, I only served 175. What happened? Well, the system worked. We don't need right? It worked. So they don't have to come back. Larry, what are you doing? I can't give you that raise now. We can get more people. You better find, what are you doing? So what happens now is I'm encouraged to do 1 or 2 things, not help or cheat, right? So what I do is, since now those other people didn't qualify anymore because they were all good, they were better, I now take anybody.
Yes.
So now I break the rules. I take anybody. And we see it here in New York City specifically. when many immigrants come to New York, as you know, New York City is about 1/3 of our population is not born in the country. Another 1/3 is not born in the city. So only about 1/3 of New York is actually born in New York City. I'm the oddball, born in Manhattan. I'm the oddball. But most people aren't. So they come here and they apply for benefits. People say, well, they're illegal immigrants. They can't get benefits. Yeah, they do all the time. And people will tell you, no, Larry, it's against the law. You're wrong. I literally see it all the time. How? They break the rules to keep servicing people.
Yep.
So when someone is not qualified, they go, I'm going to get in trouble if I don't have enough bodies. So you say yes to everybody. They will say yes to everybody. They just go yes.
It happens in federal programs too. I mean, when you look at the TANF program, the food stamps program, we've seen it explode during the pandemic. There may have been a good reason at the beginning of the pandemic when government shut down businesses and shut down employers. But as the economy came back and people are able to work, we didn't see people roll off of the welfare rolls the way they should have. You know, I'm not one of these.
But Patrice, they were working.
Yes,
they just kept taking the money.
Exactly. So their income had not changed or had increased, but they're still qualifying in some way for the benefits. Now, I am not opposed to our social safety net program. I think that there's a reason for it. If someone 100%. Falls on hard times, they need help. I'm okay with the government being there to provide a springboard, not a lifestyle, but a springboard to say, hey, here's some wraparound services to get you back on your feet, and then you can go. It's not meant to be a lifestyle, but unfortunately, if you talk about let's reform our entitlement, let's reform our social safety net programs like food stamps, like TANF programs, then you're evil. When really the goal should not be to keep people there indefinitely. The goal should be to ensure that they can be independent and leave room for people who really need it. There are people who cannot work. There are adults who are just not capable. Let that be for them, but not for everybody who just feels like, well, they're working, but they're saying, well, I mean, the system gives it to me. Why should I turn it down?
And there's a couple things behind that. Number one, I want to go back to your first part about government crowding out. I always say that whenever you add government, you by default remove community.
Yes.
It's just by default. Yes. You can't have both, right? As you this, and sadly, it is the way government works, is it makes it a zero-sum game, right? Government should not work that way, but it does. It makes it a zero-sum game that it goes push or pull, more government, less community. Just goes back and forth that way. It's terrible, but it still is true. And community will always do a better job, because when you're being helped by your community, you feel like you need to give back. You feel like you need to get back up. You feel like you need to. But when it's this government entity that's just some bureaucrat, you feel like, to your point, they're giving the money out. I don't care. I'm taking it. And I get it, you know, and people will often tell me as a libertarian, well, Larry, why would you take any government money? I'm like, I'll take any money they're going to give me. I'm not going to say no. You want me to check? I'm keeping it, of course. And they say, well, why? Why would you give it back? Here's the reason why. One, you've been stealing my taxes for 50 years. So I'm getting my money back, number one. But even just theoretically, if I honestly believed, and I don't, but if I honestly believed that I'd give my money back, they would then refund it to the people, I would do it. I swear I would. I'd be like, you know what? You give them back to, yeah, they're not. They're going to take my money and throw it away on something else. They're going to give it to Ukraine or something. I don't know. They're going to piss my money away one way or the other. So give it to me.
They're not giving it back to you.
Just give it to me instead.
They're not giving it back.
So if I at least thought they were giving it back, obviously they're not, but if I believe that, I would. Oh, you give them back to, yes, take the money back. You give them back to the people, but they're not. It's going to go in some politician's pocket, or it's going to go overseas somewhere in some war. It's going to bomb somebody or whatever. No, I'm not okay with that. So that was one point I wanted to bring up. But there was a second piece that I also want to touch, and that is the idea that if you even bring up entitlement reform, you're right. You are evil. You are horrible. But before I go there, hold on. I got a couple of comments I want to bring up. You have some fans here.
Oh.
Jean says, this woman's fantastic. Love her. So you got some fans.
Thank you.
Here we go. Patty says, another brilliant young woman who I'm telling everyone to follow. Great humans seem to be, she means attached to great humans. This old lady loves her. Well, there we go. So Patty calls herself an old lady and she loves you. So you got some fans here. I just want to let you see those real fast.
Appreciate that.
Yes. In any case, again, if you do want to follow her, please do so. Yes. You can head over, if you would, head over to Patrice Pink File on Twitter. Also, her website's there on my description page. Check that out also if you want to, giving you some details about what she's doing. You can just Google her. You'll find stuff that she's done on YouTube. All good. While you're doing that, if you happen to be on Twitter, do me a favor, retweet this now. I would appreciate it. And do click that like button. It is important. So I guess if I can keep going down to one piece you brought up, which is I do want entitlement reform. But how do you reform entitlements when they are so there's such a mishmash, everything, massive bureaucracy, big problems. I was at one point completely against any form of UBI at all. I think I'm changing my mind a bit if we could at least get rid of everything else, which we can't right now. But I mean, in theory, at least, maybe a negative income tax or something, if we could dump everything else, meaning end all the bureaucracy. And this is what Milton Friedman talked about when he talked about the idea, right? He was like, if you end everything else, there's nothing else. It's just take a check and be quiet. I'm moving towards that because I can't see. I guess I'm beginning to feel so frustrated. I can't see a way of fixing anything without something like this. Tell me if I'm wrong, Patrice. I'm happy to be wrong here.
So in theory, you're right. In practice, it's never going to happen. The idea with universal basic income, this idea that we could eliminate all of the other social safety net programs and just have one check, I guess maybe a sliding scale, I don't know, something like that. I think a lot of libertarians would agree. I'm still not of the mind that, giving people free money would not disincentivize them from work.
That's my other issue. I'm worried about it too.
We're seeing some experiments in some different states with this. Certainly, COVID has provided an opportunity to do UBI in a new way. I think a lot of states are still giving folks just a check for the sake of it. But we've also seen the unintended consequence of inflation. And so when people have a lot of extra cash and an opportunity now to spend it, they're going to spend it. And unfortunately, we've seen 40-year high inflation as a result of the American Rescue Plan that President Biden, he wanted to have his signature on a stimmy check and he got it. And unfortunately, that left us with inflation. We're going to get new numbers out tomorrow. Inflation has come down from 9%, but it's still 6%. And eggs are still 55% higher than they were last year. And
I eat a lot of eggs, so I'm feeling it. I'm feeling it.
I buy a lot of milk for my boys, so I know how much I know how much things cost. And so this idea that we'll just flood households with cash, we have to print it because obviously where's the money coming from? And it's just going to come right from your taxes. So I'm not as inclined to support UBI. Do I think we need entitlement reform? We do. The system is unsustainable. We've got the Social Security trustees telling us that it's getting insolvent, years earlier than we anticipated, probably within the next 20 years. That means there are going to be automatic cuts to people's Social Security if we don't do anything. So at this point, Republicans and Democrats need to get their act together.
That's why they're fighting in France right now, right? That's why they're striking in France. And the president said, we don't have a choice. He went out to China. He said, go ahead, burn stuff. Go ahead. We got no money, which is what I keep telling people. People tell me all the time, they go, New York State, we have a problem with our pensions. Our pension fund's about to go under. Illinois, same thing. California is better off. California still has the tech sector right now that's pumping money into it through taxation. So they still have kind of like the faucet still running in California. Grace.
Yeah.
It's running. New York used to have finance doing that for them, but finance has been leaving New York for the past 20 years, right? It's been going to Miami and Austin. So we're losing finance. In fact, people don't know this. On Wall Street, there's only one bank on Wall Street now. All the rest are gone. It's just Deutsche Bank, and they own the building, so they stay there. But otherwise, everyone else is already gone. So we're losing that. Right? So New York's in trouble. And people would say, but Larry, it's in the Constitution of New York State, so they have to pay us. When there's no money, you don't get paid. It can be written down any way you want. When there's no money, there's no money. And New York State can't just print it. So even worse for the people here in New York State. But to your point, Pete puts up this national debt almost every show. To your point, let me read it real fast. 31 trillion, 458 billion, 324 million, 224,000, $63.06. And since he put it, it's even higher. Anyway, my point being, we're going to start running out of money here.
Yeah.
And the guy in France, Macron, he raised the age and literally left the country. He just said, oh, that's it. I'm not joking. That he literally did. He did it and left the country.
He went to go cozy up with Chinese President Xi.
Because he knew he needed some cash. So he went to Papa Xi and said, hopefully maybe he can write him a check. And so he went over there and he let his people burn because he's like, I can't, there's no money. You just burn stuff then.
Here's the challenge. Here's the thing. Here's the opportunity. There are ways that we could make some reforms that would start to make some marginal cuts. I think you could raise the retirement age. There's some different policies that I've seen floated in. And if you go to IWF, we've kind of written about some of these. But here's another idea. Instead of looking at Social Security as a retirement plan, it doesn't function that way. Why not give people accounts where they start to save their own money over time for their retirement, whatever that looks like, and start to transition younger generations off of Social Security and onto a different plan? Now, I don't know, I haven't run the numbers on something like this, but make this kind of account flexible enough that if you want to use it even while you're working, but you're a single mom and want to take time off from work to have a baby and you want to fund that, maybe you have to take time and you're not going to get paid for 2 months off, that account can pay for that. There's got to be some innovation, but we can't just say, well, all hands off. Republicans and Democrats, we're not touching it in any sort of negotiations. Republicans, I think, are saying that right now. I understand strategically, older voters don't want to hear about cuts, but I said 20 years. I think it's less than 10 years where we will start to see some automatic cuts come into play if we don't do something about entitlements. And it can't just be tinkering at the corners, a $500 billion here, when we are racking it up, through government spending ideas that are ideological and are really not helping.
So let me walk down that road, ideological, because there are real problems, right? And that's true. We can see it. But people are focusing on things that, while important, I don't want to say they're not important, the level of importance is way higher. This idea of ESG, DEI, do I think these are important? Sure. If you care about them, you should care about them. I want you to be free to care about what you want. We're putting this at the top, like that's the number one thing over everything else. It seems crazy to me. And I remember I've done training in this, right? I've done training. And the trainings that I've done, I used to train actually New York City agencies. The DEI that's being done now, I don't want to train. Like, it's not what I train, right? And we've gone backwards. And if any of you are old enough to remember this, back in the 80s and 90s, diversity training, what it was called, diversity training, was terrible. It was literally reinforcing stereotypes. Guys would say things like this. I'm not joking. You guys gonna be mad, but they would say things like this. Look, if your workforce is Asian, they may like tea instead of coffee. That was training you got in the 80s and 90s. Embarrassingly bad, right? Things like that. It reinforced stereotypes. But then around the 2000s, it began to change. That's when I got involved in it, which it went away from that and went more towards emotional intelligence. It was the idea of not needing to know everybody's race, creed, color, or background, but instead understanding that people are different and having your mind open to it, right? The idea of there was a big thing with the Myers-Briggs tests, right? A lot of those. And the goal of that was to show you, look, not everyone thinks like you do, right? Different thought, diversity of concepts. That was the goal. And it was actually pretty good. I enjoyed most of it. I did a lot of that kind of training. It was good. Since maybe, I don't know, 2015-ish or so in that area, reversed. It's gone exactly back to race-based stereotype, impact versus intent no longer matters. I literally would teach people difference between impact and intent. Have a conversation, figure this out to make change. That's good emotional intelligence. That's good communication skills. Like now, no, the intent is irrelevant. All that matters is perceived impact. Yep. It's destroying our social structure, but we keep doing it. I'm sorry, I went a bit of a rant because this is my field. I apologize.
Well, you set this up so beautifully, because what I think we want is what we call true diversity. True diversity puts the individual at the spotlight, not your participation in a group. I'm a woman. I'm Black. I'm an immigrant. So, but those don't define me. What
Right.
defines me is more about my thoughts. I'm
Yes.
conservative. I lean very right on a lot of issues. I also have grown up in the ghetto. I've gone to near Ivy League schools. I mean, I have a lot of different things that I bring to the table, and boiling me down just to my participation as a woman or as a Black person, it's insulting. But unfortunately, and I've been sitting in some of these bias trainings now, they're called today, they do the opposite. They only focus on classes, and they pit classes against each other. We can
Yes.
thank Ibram Kendi and some of these newer age philosophers. Philosophers
Yes.
to thank
Yes.
for coming up with these ideas around
That
the
guy,
racial
Ibram
structure, the
X. Kendi, that
victimization
guy.
hierarchy.
Ibram X. Kendi, that guy, you mean?
Yes, yes,
Yes.
ex-Gandhi. Yes,
Yeah. That guy's terrible.
He's put to the critical race theory. He's pretty much said, okay, there's a hierarchy of victimization, and the higher up you are on that hierarchy, the more say you have, and the more society needs to redress all of the ills that have been done to you, whether or not anything has ever been done to you. And it bears out in the corporate setting with these kinds of trainings that pit people against one another.
Yeah.
That says, because you're white, you need to apologize to me for something that you've never done. And it breaks apart the social fabric of our nation. It makes it difficult for employers and employees to have tough conversations, to get along with one another. That's not the point of true diversity. True diversity should say, I am welcome however I am, but I'm not just about what class I belong to. I'm much more than that. And so, I work with the Philanthropy Roundtable to talk about what true diversity is. It's an initiative that provides some tools for organizations that really want to have those tough conversations, but starts with the individual.
Yes.
And then goes to the mission of the organization. You hire people not based on a check the box, not skin color or gender, or God forbid, sexual orientation. I shouldn't have to tell you who I sleep with every night so that you could check the box that you've hit some diversity quota. No, right. You bring the right people on the bus, get them in the right seats to advance the mission. And in the charitable sector, it's so important.
You also encourage people to lie. Right? If I know that I'm going to get somewhere by saying I'm something, I'm going to say I'm the thing, whether I am or not. And if you say that I'm not, well, now I have a lawsuit, right? So if I know I'm going to get to them because I say people say people aren't just going to say they're the thing because of that, Larry. That's dumb. No one would do that. That happens all the time. I watch it because what happens from this is now government contracts. Once government contracts come into play, they will say anything because government contracts are worth tens of millions of dollars. Would I lie and say I'm gay for $100 million? A lot of people would. I'm just saying, would I lie and say that I'm American, I'm Native American, right? For a $10 million contract? I might. All I'm saying is as you make these incentives like this, you encourage people to cheat.
And you don't want to put no employer wants to be put in the position of saying, asking or figuring out what people's personal choices are, lifestyles are. That should not be what you're doing as a hiring entity. Frankly, in the charitable sector also, this idea of redressing past societal ills means that founders, donors, foundations need to give a certain amount of money to specific causes, right. Social justice causes, because that's going to fix all of the racial issues in this country. No. Organizations and donors and funders, they may have a very specific mission. Maybe they're for military service. And by the way, people of color are in the military, so they're serving those communities. Let's get away from this. I think this whole movement today is drawing us away from mission, drawing organizations away from what's most important, and pushing them towards supporting, frankly, organizations that could be ideologically opposed to what they believe in and are not helping the people that they're meant to serve.
Yes. And this goes back to big business again. What people aren't seeing is a lot of people are funded by large financial institutions. And when large financial institutions say, so company so-and-so, you want for us to give you money, you want us to loan you this or loan you that, or be very happy when you decide to go public, or when you have a secondary offering, or when you decide to, or be the people who are going to help you when it comes to buying back your stock. Well, we have a thing called ESG, and your score is a little low, so you better raise your score, or otherwise, we're not going to do X, Y, and Z. Mm-hmm. And people will often say, these stupid companies, they're going woke. They're going woke because it's to their financial benefit. That's the issue. Their financial benefit is what matters. So ESG is about big finance making that happen. Let me grab a comment if I can here. Okay. Sam says, I have more in common with Patrice than I do with Prince Harry. Life is more than genitals and skin color. He's not wrong. He's not wrong.
Don't get me started on Prince Harry and his wife. That's a whole other tangent I go off on the radio show on a regular basis.
So tell my audience about your show, if you would real fast.
Oh, yes. So WMAL 105.9 if you're in the Washington, D.C. area, but WMAL.com, you can listen. It's called Larry O'Connor and Company. I'm company on Friday mornings. My colleague, Julie Gunlock, is also there. And then we have another, fill-in guest from time to time. But we interview politicians, policymakers, members of Congress. We interview, thought leaders, people who are everything from counter-terrorism to pop culture. We cover all of those. And it's a morning drive time show from 5 to 9 a.m. So I'm on every Friday. It's Friday, 5 to 9 a.m. and it's smart talk. You will learn something that you didn't know before. And by the way, here's who listens. Nancy Pelosi would listen to our show going in because she wants to hear how the other side is talking about different issues. So whatever is going on in the news, we are covering, and we're bringing some smart analysis to the conversation.
I love that. Guys, if you enjoy this show, click that like button if you haven't already. If you are watching this on Twitter, please retweet it. It's the way people are going to see this. It's the most important piece. And also, of course, please support my sponsors. I say every time, but please do it. Go over to theadvocates.org. There's a link right in the description. Take one of the surveys and then share your results so that people can do it. It makes them happy. It makes me happy. It's free and it supports the show. But finally, please support Patrice. Check her out over on Twitter, Patrice Pink File on Twitter. So show her some love. She showed you some. So show her a little love too. Patrice, thank you so much for coming on. I appreciate the time you gave us.
Thank you so much. I've loved being on. I hope I can come back sometime soon.
There we go. I love it. Guys, everybody, thank you so much for today. I will see you all